Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to Slow Art Friday. My name is Christy McMillan. I'm the Director of Learning and Engagement here at the Asheville Art Museum, and I'm joined by two of our touring docents, Hank Bovee and Jim Crook, who will be leading today's conversation. Each Friday at 12 p.m., docents lead virtual, interactive conversations about a few artworks in our collection or special exhibitions. The goal is simple: slow down, discover the joy of looking at art, and talk about the experience with others. For today's program, Hank and Jim will lead us in an interactive conversation about 4 artworks in the museum's collection. We'll spend about 15 minutes or so with each one. Hank and Jim will allow us time to look at each work on our own, slowly, before leading a conversation with questions. As participants, we encourage you to engage in dialogue with Hank, Jim, myself, and each other throughout the program. Before we get started, a few notes. You'll notice that your microphone and video are muted by default as you are getting signed in. We do welcome and encourage you to turn on your video so that we can see who we're talking to, and I'll make it in just a moment so that you can turn on your microphone too. Choose a quiet room and close the door. Please silence any alerts from nearby devices as they can be very distracting during the conversation. If you do turn on your video, try not to sit in front of a window, lamp, or other strong source of light or movement as it makes it difficult for us to see you. Use headphones and microphone for best sound quality. While you can log on using a smartphone, please use a desktop, laptop, or tablet to see slides and meeting tools on a larger screen. Make sure that your screen name includes your first name and last initial, or first name and last name, again, so that we know who we're talking to. During the program, in order to ask questions or make comments, the easiest way to do so will be to unmute your microphone when Hank, Jim, or I ask for questions or comments. 2 other ways to participate is by typing questions or comments into the chat box or raising your hand in the participant sidebar, and I will call on you and ask you to unmute your microphone. I can say that method 1, just unmuting yourself and jumping into the conversation, is definitely the easiest and most expedient way to participate. Sometimes it takes a while to get to the comments in the chat box and raised hands. Finally, we are recording. If you prefer not to be recorded, please make sure that your video and audio remain muted and use the chat box to submit any questions or comments that you may have. At this point, I'm going to make it so that folks can unmute themselves. Please do leave your microphone muted unless you're actively asking a question or making a comment. Before we get started, does anybody have any questions? All right, Hank and Jim, what will we be talking about today?
Hey, good morning, everybody, and welcome to Slow Art Friday. Before we get to that, I want to make one quick mention that it actually was a year ago this month that the museum piloted their first Slow Art Friday, and a year ago next month I facilitated my first Slow Art Friday. And in that year, we built up a nice Slow Art Friday community. I feel like I've gotten to know some of you. I look forward to those Fridays because I can see you and hear what you have to say about what we're looking at. So thank you all so much for a good year of Slow Art Fridays. Today, we're going to talk about listening to the animals. Over the past year, in my Slow Art Fridays, we've talked about people, places, sculpture. I've asked the question more than once, is it art? But I've only looked at animals once in a Slow Art Friday. And I think, so with that in mind, I thought it was high time we took another look at animals. Plus, one of the triggers for me was on my Facebook page one day, I saw this quote, and it was, art should comfort the disturbed and disturb the comfortable. And I thought, you know, after a year of pandemic, I think it's safe to say we're all a little disturbed. So here's a good way. We'll look at some animals and hopefully we'll find some comfort in what we're looking at. So with that said, how it works is I'll give you a few moments to look at the artwork and then we'll talk about it. So Christy, if you would go ahead and put the first slide up there. Okay, anybody want to jump in there? What's going on in this artwork?
Excuse me, Sharon?
Go ahead, Sharon. Yeah.
that looks like a very, very good way to carry the kids around. Really, I think she's got it down. That's super. Easier than we have it.
Exactly. You see a mother there that's being very efficient in hauling her kids around. So what else do we see?
It looks like wood to me, and I love the colors. I like the blues and grays and blacks and whites, and then around the mouth with the reds and white and the little bit of the red on the tip of the mouth and the black on the tip of the nose. I just think the coloration really makes it stand out.
And I have to agree with you 100% on that. I think the colors, the markings. Christy, if you could zoom in on the face a little bit, and then we could see better what Laurel's referring to with the red gums, the black nose, the red lip or tongue, I guess that might be. So good observations. What else do we see?
I've always enjoyed the tail on this piece and how straight and perpendicular it is.
And so it is. It's pretty much straight back because if it wasn't, I imagine the babies might not hang on.
Well, I was trying to say it's very efficient for carrying the children. Yes.
So, anybody else see anything? Yeah, Sharon.
Well, as I'm looking at it, it's making me wonder, and I'm assuming that this is to be a possum. I'm wondering what the real possum coat looks like. And I'm thinking, gee, I don't know if I'm all that familiar with it. But the way the artist has colored the gray area, gray and blue, different little colors here, seems to me to be looking like fur, kind of a, mottled look there a bit. And now it's making me wonder what a real possum coat is constructed of.
I love the contrasts all around like you mentioned, the coat. I was looking at the same thing, but the contrast with it's there, and then you have the tail and the face in the wood and the clean and the feet, and then the little possums or whatever they are. I'm not sure what is this animal. I know it's abstract, but I can't think of what it is.
Just to clarify, it's a possum.
It isn't a possum. Okay, but I love the contrasts of it all. Your eye goes all over the place.
I'm assuming it's three-dimensional.
Okay, Laurel, then Gary.
Okay, I'm assuming it's three-dimensional, and I'm wondering if the baby possums have faces as well that we just can't see because they're facing the back.
I can't say for sure, but I think this looks like an eye. So I think that they do have eyes and noses, Laurel.
So I'm kind of thinking that this is kind of very true to life. We had a possum on the farm at one point, and they have a pouch like a kangaroo that all the baby possums stay in, and then they come out and they climb on its coat. So the mother actually carries the possums, the baby possums around, kind of like this. And one night, one of them fell off, and it was in our driveway, and it was about this size. So we scooped it up and tried to help it a little bit, but it clung to your finger the way it's clinging to the tail, like it was very affectionate and clung on. But this is a lot cheerful. It's a lot more cheerful looking than the mommy possum tends to be.
Did it survive?
It didn't survive, unfortunately. Very, very difficult for them to even feed. And they do suggest if you see a dead possum on the side of the road, you should check for babies because sometimes they'll be inside its pouch.
Oh, wow.
Actually, Gary, you brought up a good point. And I mean, my first reaction, just like everyone else, is that it's a mommy possum with her babies. But if that's the case, I would expect a little poochier belly, either with its pouch or have some some nipples for the babies to be feeding off of. And with babies that small, they would still be feeding from the mother. So I'm wondering if this is maybe either a surrogate mother or dad taking them out,
Surrogate mother.
taking them out to give the mom a
Oh
break.
dear.
So, a paid surrogate, that's how she got that pretty coat.
Yeah.
So
Sharon, just feel free to jump right in.
Okay. Well, I'm just kind of looking at a picture of them on another machine here, and if they are marsupials, which I guess would be because of the pouch and all, then the feeding, Christy, don't worry about it. They go back in the pouch, and that's where
Is it inside the pouch that
yeah,
happens?
the feeding, yeah, is inside the pouch. Yeah, and the fur on them apparently can be different colors. Also, the babies are called joeys. Isn't that interesting? So very similar. Isn't that what the kangaroo babies are called?
yes, I think so.
Yeah. So very, very interesting. But they do have a pretty good set of choppers there. So,
Yes.
so I guess the animal is to reinforce the fact too that it is a carnivorous. But I don't know.
I don't know. I would say they're probably kind of omnivorous, but I'm not sure.
Oh,
I
Very
think they
good.
are
So-
omnivorous. Yeah.
That's what I'm thinking.
But I want to mention something that Sandy said in the comments that I enjoy. She says, I am laughing because to me, she is smiling. This makes me happy. I would love for it to be my own to keep me laughing.
oh, very cute. Yeah.
There has been a real effort in the last, I'm not sure when this piece dates to, but in the last few years been a real effort to rebrand this particular animal as someone that's friendly and beneficial. They're very, very beneficial to the environment. I believe they eat ticks and things like that, you know.
They
so
eat a lot, like thousands of ticks a day.
yeah, so
Exactly.
so in North Carolina, they're really important that they're part of our environment. But people run over them easily, and they feel threatened by them because they look like Alice Cooper, you know, a little bit. But they're actually quite a very friendly animal. Like some people have them as pets, and they really become very adorable.
So, and Gary, you really bring up a good point that I kind of wanted to steer us in that direction for a moment. And Sandy does too in the chat. She says one killed her kitten. And earlier in our discussion, someone said they weren't sure what the possum's coat really looked like. You know, we're unsure about their habits. You said, Gary, it's an animal whose image is going through a rehabilitation. So what does this say about how we have been viewing possums up to this point?
Well, I'm sorry.
Oh, go ahead.
This piece kind of reminds me of the saying "grinning like a possum," and it seems to me that perhaps the artist has over exaggerated the mouth and the smile that this particular possum has.
Yeah, possums' snouts aren't that long.
Right. Yeah, I was going to say we've kind of got off into what are possums and who knows what about possums and got into the nature of it. But looking back at the art of it, I think it looks very, very much like a folk art piece, as opposed to trying to look realistic. Whatever it's definitely, to me anyway, reminding of the folk art kind of genre.
And Sandy says that they also love plums. I have plum trees and they make a mess. So, but let's kind of summarize what we've talked about here. I think we've had a good time looking at this possum. We've appreciated the colors, the whole concept of motherhood. We've decided this possum is smiling. And I think that speaks volumes because before when I mentioned, you know, how in our conversation, we said we didn't really know what their coat looked like. We didn't know how they cared for their babies. And I think it's because we sort of have an aversion to opossums. You know, they're nighttime creatures. They're creepy. One killed my kitten, you know. But here I think the artist has given us a whole new way to look at these possums. So, Christy, if you would move to the next slide, we'll get the specifics on this. The artist is Minnie Atkins. This is from 2005. So back to the previous comment, I think this probably predates that whole effort to make for us to look at possums in a new light. It is carved and painted wood. It's 9.5 by 40 inches. So it's a pretty decent size. And Minnie Adkins, the artist, is considered a folk artist or self-trained artist. She was born in Isonville, Kentucky, 1934, and she actually began carving as job losses in her area due to the decline of the coal industry. She began carving to earn a few extra dollars. Then actually one day wandered into a gallery, told them she was a carver. They asked for some of her stuff, and she took off from that point. You can actually sometimes even find some of her work at the Folk Art Gallery and Framing that's just down the street from the museum on Biltmore Avenue. One thing I want to read you is what an intern at the museum, Sadie Allen, wrote about this piece. And she says, often on my nighttime drives, I am confronted by a scampering beast known to many as the opossum. Some view them as merely as trash thieves or even giant ugly rats. However, others, including Minnie Adkins, see the intrinsic beauty in their being as shown in her wood carving, Possum and Babies. This work features a mother opossum with a straight tail with two babies hanging off of her in an upside down manner. Despite her gums flashing red and her teeth being visible, the sculpture still has a charming and almost cute aura about it. From now on, every time I see a scurrying friend run across the street, I will remember this charming and unique sculpture that Adkins created. Her work portrays the value in creatures often unwanted in society and makes their good qualities evident. So I think we achieved the same thing that Sadie did when she wrote that little paragraph. So
definitely, yeah, and that was really sweet. She's a really good writer, and I think like Gary said, it's like the possum's reputation is trying to be rehabilitated, and I think that they've done a really good job of that over the past few years, because now whenever I see a possum, I think about it in a positive way, all of the things that it's doing for me and my neighbors, rather than thinking of it as a giant rat. But I think it's funny because my husband had never seen a possum before. He's from Turkey, and so he saw one for the first time several years ago, and he said, "There's some giant rat thing that ran out in front of my car. What is that?" And I told him about a possum and what they do, and he says, "Oh, guess what? I saw a possum today."
Cool. I have a photograph here. I don't know if you guys can see that well.
Oh yeah.
Oh yes.
So that's all the little babies on her back.
Oh, thanks.
Pretty amazing.
That's really neat. Thanks for pulling that up.
How many are in a litter? Because if this is the mothers, there's only 2 there, and that's representative of babies. But I'm just wondering how many possums in a litter.
I think it's typically 6 to 13. I think.
And there may be some in her pouch.
At least 6.
It's a lot. And one last thing, and that is Sandy just mentions that there's not a lot of possums where she is from, Montana. So she confused us with a raccoon. So I'm glad we could educate you a little bit there on some of the animals that we have here in North Carolina. With that said, I'm going to turn this over to my colleague, Jim Crook, and he's going to talk about the next piece.
Thank you, Hank. Christy, you can go ahead and advance to the next slide whenever you're able. Okay, so let's take a few seconds to look at this artwork, and you'll find it's quite detailed. And before we move on to discuss this piece, Gary just popped into the chat box that possums can have up to 20 in a litter, but only about half of them survive. Okay, so moving on to what you see on your screen. What's going on in this artwork?
To me, it looks like a snake that's eating a heart. But I'm intrigued by some of the smaller things all around. Like to the bottom left looks like dice. And to the right like a card or a diamond or some cards, and then up a little might be like a palm reading. So between the dice and the cards and the palm, it's kind of intriguing, and the ace coming out of the side of the green on the left there too.
So Laurel's intrigued by the snake and how it appears to be perhaps eating this heart, but also a lot of the side action that's going on around it. Good, good. So what else do we see? What do you see about the dice that may be interesting and pertinent to this particular work?
They seem to be moving because of these lines sort of coming out from either side of them. It gives them a sense of motion in the way that sort of we've learned maybe through cartoons or illustrations to look for lines behind something to indicate movement. But I love the way that this match guy sort of to the right of the dice either seems to be pushing them, moving them. Maybe he's the one that thrown them, but it's a match that's a light. So he's not going to last very much longer either.
Oh, that's a great observation, Christy.
I have
I see.
They have just been thrown.
Aren't they snake eyes?
Snake eyes on the.
I didn't even think about that.
Yeah,
Ellen and Laurel are
guys.
play the dice.
I am, in a certain sense, I am repulsed by this because I just have an absolute aversion to snakes. I'm more fascinated by the background and what the symbols mean. And it's funny because there's a cross there, and there are religions that use snakes in these religions. You know, some of the more fundamentalist evangelical minor denominations.
So Ellen brings up that there is perhaps a religious bent going on here, and also how snakes are sometimes used in religious services and events.
And they're repulsive in many
And they're
cases.
repulsive.
Well, I'm seeing
Thank you.
I'm seeing in the background there all kinds of maybe games of gambling. So I'm thinking if we have dice and we have cards, and if that's like a dart game in the top right corner, things that maybe are not good for us and maybe harming us if we're engaged in them. And so the snake is piercing the heart, and maybe the snake is something not good in our lives if we are doing all this gambling and you know, that's not a good thing for us. I don't know.
There's
also-
a cigarette.
A mystery, yes, cigarettes, right?
And
Very
a
bad for us.
skull. And there's a skull.
A skull, yeah.
It does
Yeah.
look like the hand under the cross has the stigmata on it as well.
Let me
It
zoom on
looks-
that a little bit, Gary.
So all the things that might be bad for us in our life.
Oh, Gary, that's well spotted.
And this even might look like a cruder representation of an anatomical heart to the left of it.
Mhm.
Christy, could you zoom at the upper left corner, please?
Upper left, sure.
Yes.
And I looked up dab, and that
The devil.
dab, D-A-B, means a handmade sword.
Mm.
So,
Oh,
we have
never
the-
seen
I was wondering about that. Thank you.
so the sword, the devil, and the skull.
I'm kind of intrigued by the devil and how he, to me, appears to be watching this scene with some glee.
Yeah.
Be rather excited and enthusiastic about what's going on.
I've noticed too that the dab that Gary pointed out, it seems to be the same knife or similar to the one that's going through the skull, that's piercing the skull.
Mm-hmm.
It's got that same sort of interesting
Oh yeah, the
curly
handle.
cue on the handle.
Yeah.
And speaking of piercings, if you could go down to the bottom left for just a second, Christy.
Bottom left.
Yes, ma'am. Right above the dice, right there. And look above the heart that's to the left of the dice. And to me, that looks like a whale that's been harpooned. So kind of keeping with that piercing kind of a theme that we have here as a, secondary action.
To the right of the little match guy with the dice almost looks like a spider web maybe, and that the snake's tail is kind of piercing the spider web perhaps.
Yeah.
But I'm also intrigued by the venom. If you look at the snake's venom, like right there, you can see it. It's up at the top by his
Dripping.
mouth, and then there's more venom coming down there. Yeah.
And then there's also the mouth that's smoking, and then right below it, you see this arrow pointing in and then going out, so that they seem to connect. So again, it goes back to those things that are bad for us, perhaps.
Vices.
But it's also interesting that on the deck of cards, we're only seeing the diamond. Like
Diamonds.
we have the heart in the center, but we don't have any of the clubs or the spades. It's
There's a diamond.
Yeah.
there's diamonds throughout it,
yeah.
but that seems to be the main one that's represented.
And the one on the bottom with the legs, that looks like a card.
Looks like you're playing card with legs.
And then up beside the cross, there's another diamond.
Yeah, there's diamonds sort of in every quadrant. There's one here, one here.
One with the devil.
There's a heart here.
Yeah.
And Sandy says in the chat box that when she looks at the bottom, what we say is venom, to her they look like tears. And as I looked at it, I was wondering if that might be a drop of blood, coming from the pierced heart.
That's what I thought. The heart was bleeding.
Yeah, and then a lot of it all has that kind of idea of traditional tattoos.
That's that's what I was thinking too.
Oh, God.
Exactly.
Like the old style army tattoos.
Yeah.
Or homemade ones, or ones
Yeah.
not done by professionals, especially these ones that are sort of around. They're all in one color, which reminds me of sort of when you do them at home, you're usually doing them with a pen and a needle and using the ink from the pen. So they're
Oh, dear.
You sound like you have experience.
I've seen a lot of films, Gary. I don't have any homemade ones on me, though.
But yet this is so colorful.
Well, you know what? I'm glad you said that. I was just thinking, what can we say that's positive about this? It actually has nice designs on the snake, the green blotches and the different purple and a flower. I think the most we could say was that it's at least colorful.
And I agree. And Sandy says it reminds her of a bleeding heart.
Yeah.
And to just get back to what Gary was describing just a second ago, to me, when I was looking at this critically, I actually was thinking about the serpent, and then I looked at the cross, and then I didn't know that that bad, was an acronym or a symbol or something for the sword, but I was thinking backwards, it's bad. So I was thinking about the devil, the skull, the gambling, and the cards and the dice, and the cross, and how all of these things are woven together through religious experience. And that's one of the things that came to me as I kind of tried to weave all of these things together into some sort of a common theme.
To your
One
point,
thing I
Jen,
can't get, what's on the right of the flower?
Here?
What is
Let me
that
zoom.
stuff? What's that thing? It looks like a top hat. I don't know what is that.
It looks
thing?
like Mr. Peanut.
Yeah.
Yeah.
it does.
Kind of
Or a potato with a top hat, something like
Yeah.
that.
Very phallic looking.
I don't know what it is. So weird.
Mhm.
Strange thing. Okay.
So what else do we see? Anything else?
The fact that the flower is not withered or dying, I mean, maybe the Garden of Eden, I don't know, the flowers are pretty and green and colorful, and it's just a very interesting piece that the heart and the serpent or snake are so vibrant, and yet we've discovered all these little bits and pieces surrounding it.
And there's, to kind of add to what you're saying, there's even more pieces, like right above the cross, it looks like a reversed American flag, but it's so faded out looking.
Mm-hmm.
Well, could the snake be representing temptation?
I was wondering that too, Sharon, because, you know, the snake, just like the opossum, is another animal that's very misaligned, you know, and you know, we don't like snakes either. And to Jim's point, in a lot of religions, snakes have a significance. You know, in Old Testament-based religions, the snake was you know, who tempted Eve, and the whole beginning of the original sin and all that good stuff. So I think you might be right there.
There's something about this that makes me feel like it's very personal to the artist, with all the symbols in the background and the snake and the heart, like you said, the bleeding heart. There's something, what's the artist and what's his or her background?
Well, that is a good question.
I almost, sorry.
No, go ahead.
I
Gary.
almost feel that it's almost more universal than personal. Like I find it to be kind of more stereotypical, and the snake going through the heart is kind of like that idea of what the snake, how it belongs in different religions, and it usually has a bad connotation, but it's all part of being in your heart. Like it's part and parcel of the life experience, that without that kind of evil, there's no good, that type of idea. So the snake is actually in your heart, like that evil or temptation is all part of your heart in that sense.
Why did the artist make this? That's the question I had. I feel like there's a backstory to this.
Well, Christy,
Maybe, you know, doodling and image making is the artist's way of working through his or her own sort of demons or things that, you know, some people, I see it a lot, especially working in an art environment, that people sort of doodle to keep their mind, or I guess I should say, it's just a way to keep sitting still for people that are very creative and need to sort of move around a lot. And when you have to sit still, you have to do something. And this, to me, at least the parts that are around the edges sort of have that doodle quality to them. But something that, you know, you're doodling something that might be sort of in your subconscious at the time, that maybe your mind is trying to work through. Not sure.
well,
I'm
Gary's
just
showing
taking
us his doodles.
Hi, this is Micah.
Hey, Micah.
Hi, Micah.
Hey,
Hi, Micah.
hey. I'm taking another look at it for you know, kind of backing away. And I'm wondering if the snake is protecting the human heart from these vices.
Oh, Micah, that's a very interesting way of approaching this, I think.
All righty.
Well, this has been great discussion, and I know that we have a couple of other works that we need to look at. So, Christy, why don't you go ahead and put up the information? And let me just tell you that Tony Fitzpatrick is a Chicago-based artist that was born in 1958. And he does have an interesting backstory. And prior to becoming an artist, he was a radio host, a boxer, a bartender, a construction worker, and an actor. But in October of 1983, he had a pivotal event where he was in a near fatal car crash. And at that point, he gave up drinking and embraced becoming a multimedia artist. And he works in collage and painting and printing and drawing. And he basically draws his inspiration from Chicago street, the Chicago street scene, from tattoo art and from folk art. He has authored and illustrated 8 books of art and poetry. And last year in 2020, because of the COVID pandemic, it kind of sidelined his art shows, et cetera. So he took some of his artworks and turned them into jigsaw puzzles and is selling those on his website. One thing I did learn, and being a child of Chicago, is that the Art Institute of Chicago has 187 of his works They're all online and you're able to view them individually. So if this piece resonates with you at all, I would encourage you to go to the Art Institute of Chicago website and take a look at some of his other works, because they're a lot like this, that they all have a central figure, either animal or something mythological, but the doodles and the other representations on the periphery of the work are very exciting, just like this one is. So, all right, are there any other questions on this piece? Okay, Christy, let's move on.
Sorry, what was the museum in Chicago?
Oh, I'm sorry, the Art Institute of Chicago.
Got it. Thank you.
You're welcome. Okay, now this one's a little bit calmer than the one we just looked at. So let's take a close look at this one. All right, so what do we see going on in this artwork?
This looks like some calves, some animals, but I love the colors, the purples and the pinks and the yellows and the blues by the sky, kind of very fluffy, almost reminds me of like cotton candy, just kind of like soft and natural. And my eye is drawn to that, and then to the animals, and they look like they're looking at something that we don't see out of the picture.
So Laurel likes the animals, the fact they may be looking at something, and also the environment and the colors of the environment in which they're in. It's very good. So what
I
else?
think they kind of look like they're looking back at us, Laurel, and saying, what are you all doing here?
There's something
it's very pastoral. It's very calming too. Very nice.
it's
Thank
something
you.
very sweet about it.
Yes.
That's the way I could describe it. Sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt you, Sharon.
Especially after the last image.
Yes. Yes. Thank you, Jim.
But it looks to me, it looks like the calves, are they cows? Calves? Are almost superimposed on another slide or another like double image of photography.
And Michael, what do you see that makes you say that?
Well, I knew you were going to ask me that. Let's see. They just look superimposed on another image. The colors, like in the foreground, there's almost like a pink or a reddish tone. The trees in the background have been altered to create maybe more of a contrast with the calves. It just looks like multiple layers to me.
And that's well spotted. And I will say that I've looked at this a good bit, but until you said that, to me, the calf, if that's what it is on the right, it looks like his hooves are missing. That perhaps as he was placed, if this is where he was placed on a different canvas, or that perhaps his hooves are not there.
It definitely is an idealistic look at cattle. You know, we bumper up to a pasture. So last night there was a bunch of thunder, and that whole herd comes up to the house and stands right 3 feet from the house. So we're very close to those cows, but they're never this clean. Like, they just are never that clean, first of all. They're not clean animals. And even in the rain, they're not as clean as this. And these are white cows that just wouldn't have that. And I think it was the lady in red, I talked about how pretty and the candy flossness of the sky. And I think that all kind of is part of that idealistic kind of take on what this place is, that it wouldn't be that picturesque normally. You know?
I'm
But it's
kind
a
of
beautiful-
interested. I'm
ahead.
kind of interested in the medium that this was done in. It's so soft looking. It looks to me like it's pastels, like oil pastels, and they're for a while I thought the cows were done in a different medium, but now I'm thinking probably, and I'd be anxious to find out what medium it is. Hmm.
What else do we see before we move on to the information plate?
They almost look suspended. That, and I, with the superimposition, as if they were suspended into the background. Like you said, you can't see the feet on the calf on the right, and even the one in the back. But looking at the one on the left, it looks like he or she is just put there with all the branches and the brambles. There's really no solid ground that's visible.
Mm.
So
Yeah.
Ellen's seeing that there's lack of solid ground and that perhaps the calves look like they're suspended in place.
Should I zoom sort of towards their feet area?
Sure.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So Sandy asked an interesting question is this surrealism? So in your opinion, does this look like a surrealistic kind of artwork?
Hmm.
Does it, to anyone, does that look surrealistic?
A little bit more impressionism than maybe surrealism.
I see where Sandy's coming from on
Oh.
that. Primarily, I think because of the colors. I mean, in real life, the sky isn't purple. I've seen plenty of yellow skies, so I don't have a problem with that. But the trees look a little too close to be that blue.
Mm-hmm.
And there's some interesting things going on with these grasses, like there's some purple and blue used in the grasses that this is maybe like too much of a stretch for what my experience of what these colors should be. So it almost feels more dreamlike in that sense, or like there's a manipulation of colors. But whenever I think of things that are dreamlike or dreamy, I always think of surrealism, because surrealism works in the same way that dreams work, in that things can be in the same space, or you can transition between spaces, or things happen that don't happen sort of in the waking world and dreams, but they always sort of make sense when you're in the dream,
What do you think your viewing experience would be like if this were in black and white? Do you think it would be more realistic?
Yes. Yeah, because as Christy says, the colors are not, in nature, really. The trees are not blue like that, whatever. So if it were just white, gray, and black, I think it would look more realistic.
I think it would lose something.
Yeah, I'm enjoying the colors, actually, although they're not true to life.
Right, but I think it is very visually striking, the way the colors come together.
Exactly.
Without the color, this would just be a completely different artwork. It would almost be sort of run-of-the-mill snapshot of somebody who, got a little too close to the cows to take their picture. It wouldn't, I think, have the same artistic quality to it, and that the color adds.
The position of the ears makes me think like they heard something, because not just that they've turned their heads and that they're looking, but just the way the ears are, that they've heard some rustling or someone taking their picture or something of that.
That's what I was thinking, Laurel. They noticed the person sneaking up behind them to take their picture.
Yeah.
Well, you think something caught their attention, apparently all at the same time, right?
Yeah, but they don't seem threatened. They feel to me very gentle, especially the one on the left. And there's also, as I said in the beginning, there's this layered quality. Somebody mentioned it being kind of 3D. When I back away,
Sandy mentioned that it looks 3D to her.
Yeah, and the woods and the grasses almost look like a photograph that's been altered.
Mm-hmm.
There's a photographic quality to it, which I can't explain.
Well, Christy, at that point, why don't we pull up the next slide? And you can see that you are correct. It is a hand-colored gelatin print. is called Calves. And I was not able to find a tremendous amount of information about this particular artist. I did find on Ancestry that her full name is Sharon Ruth Anglin Kuhn. She was born in Berea, Kentucky on March the 12th, 1951, and she expired in Asheville, North Carolina, December 20th, 1993. So she was relatively young when she passed. She was considered to be a Piedmont artist, and over time she did some collaborations of poems and photographs with a gentleman named James Dickey. The most well-known of those is a work called Interventions. I noticed in her obituary that she was survived by a son whose name was Jody Kuhn. And I noticed that this was a gift of Jody Kuhn. So I was wondering, Christy, if you might be able to confirm that this was a gift from her son to the museum?
I can't say that for sure, but it certainly sounds like you're on the right track.
Right, so perhaps. Okay, so any other questions or comments before we move to our last work?
One last comment on that. Given the technique that she used to paint the background, I'm wondering how our perception is going to change on landscapes, given that everybody's got their smartphones with filters on them, and people are starting to create images like this with their phone that we see every single day. And at a certain point, we're going to start forgetting that the environment doesn't actually look that way, you know, because we're getting so used to these kind of filters that alter it a lot. Does that make sense?
An interesting observation, and I will say that, you know, seeing that this one was actually meticulously hand colored, and to have the filters be able to just, you know, do that so efficiently. You're right. It may be something to think about.
I think you've got whole generations of people, Gary, who are learning not to trust their eyes with photographs and to question what's on them, really.
Andy made a very interesting comment in the chat box. Could you explain that?
Sure. I just have to wonder, because of symbolism, the fact that these three calves are white. And now if you look, I see lots of triangles, and I'm an ex-Catholic, schooled in the Blessed Trinity. And I just want to say God is watching in three forms.
Interesting observation, Sandy. Thank you.
Thanks, Sandy. All right, so should I go to the last one, Hank?
Let's do it. So go ahead and take a few moments to look at this, and then we will talk about it.
I love him. Yeah.
So, all right, what's going on in this artwork?
I don't know much about dog breeds. I don't own a dog, but it almost looks like a Wanorama to me. If that's
Yeah.
Weimaraner, yeah.
yeah, that's the dog it kind of looks like. And the ears look velvety, but it's very interesting with the red, obviously with the half of the head with the snout and the eye faded out in that red portion over there. It's just, you know, it's just interesting.
This looks like a Wakeman to me.
A what?
A Wakeman.
Wegman?
I think that was the photographer who did so many of his wine. Of course, somebody else could do their dog as well, but oh, so wonderfully, wonderful, funny, different pictures, the dog in all kinds of positions and wearing clothing and all kinds of things. But I don't know how he gets them to sit so still, but apparently he's trained his dogs to do that. But anyway, that's so interesting looking, isn't it? With the red filter on the left there, so realistic on the right and kind of unrealistic on the left, but I think same animal.
Looks like he's going into hiding.
Yeah, hiding. I've got three thoughts. One is timeout. So like naughty dog and timeout. My second thought is, you know, like voting booths or phone booths or booths when you, again, Gary, watched on TV when people visit folks who might be in prison, and there's those sort of plexiglass dividers. So he's, you know, waiting for whoever he's visiting to come visit him. My third thought is the way that really traditional portraits were sort of profile, like 100%, you know, profile. And that it reminds me of some of the, you know, maybe Renaissance or Baroque portraits where you see somebody that's purely just in profile, having their portrait made. So all of none of those go together, but these are the things that have flashed through my mind when I've seen this, I think, portrait of a dog.
So those all good observations, Christy, because yeah, this is one reason I chose this, is it on the surface appears to be a very simple photograph, but as you've just demonstrated, there could be all kinds of things going on. So what else can we see here?
I like love the realism of on the right hand part of this work, and just to see the veins and the ears in his body is very interesting.
I agree with Jim, and the lighting too on the ear and the top of the head, and appears to be no leash, at least around the neck or the collar, unless there's a harness around the body that we can't see.
So right, in your view, the dog's not being restrained at all. And yeah, you're very impressed, what I'll say, with the light, almost that studio lighting, as though he was having a formal portrait made.
Mm-hmm. It looks like he's on the looking for something, but very optimistically, because if you were, say, being punished into a timeout, probably his head would be down, and he looks very happy, maybe, you know, upbeat, let's put it that way.
Do you have a dog, Ellen?
Yes. I have a purebred.
When my dog is happy and upbeat, it's not looking like this.
Well, but he's not looking sad. He's not looking like there's nothing that the tail, well, of course we can't see it, but I imagine that the tail is wagging, or at least up. It's not down, looking down or depressed. Let's put it that way. I just think he looks at least pleasant, and, you know, maybe leaning pleasant to happy, if I make any sense.
Sandy mentioned in the chat box that she likes the colors, especially the blue color in the upper right hand corner, and also thinks that this reminds her of the yin and yang.
I agree with what Christy said about the old-fashioned portraits of just doing the profile.
Because, you know, Micah, those are so stoic, right? Usually the people that are sitting for those, they don't have much of an expression on their face. Not that you could see it, because you're only seeing sort of their face from the side, but you know, it's stately. You're sitting up, you've got good posture, and, you know, you're not showing much emotion in those.
Well, also because way back, you had to sit still for a very long period of time to get the exposure time. Could be a minute or 2 minutes
for a photograph, yeah,
or longer. And then if you look at the outer edge, it is like a it's like a negative, or it's reminiscent of some of those old prints.
Very good observation. I see exactly what you're saying. I mean, it is going to have that look of the dog is sitting there patiently, because it's taking a while for the portrait to be made. And so you all know, this is a William Wegman. Earlier, someone said something about the guy that photographs the dogs, and there's this artist. You know, I think the majority of the work that we are familiar with is very much re-anthropomorphizes those dogs, puts them in outfits. They're doing very human-like activities. And this seems to be a departure from that. So that leads me to ask you all a question on the last piece, last artwork that Jim showed. We mentioned surrealism, we mentioned impressionism. Is there an art movement that comes to mind when you look at this one?
For me, abstract expressionism. This reminds me, if you just take out the dog, it looks like a Mark Rothko painting. But then it's like the dog sort of interloped into, you know, that painting. But just what I think it was Micah had pointed out, sort of these edges here, some of them are super straight and clean, but some of them are maybe a little brushier. So it just makes me think of Rothko right away.
It's interesting that there's a slight horizontal line just above the dog's nose. And then the spot that's between the red and the dog is a combination leaning towards a purple or burgundy of the blue and the red.
Yeah, it's not as sort of flat red as you think it is at first. If you allow your eyes time to adjust, that's actually sort of more purpley, and this is, if you look, sort of has a brushiness to it as well. This is a darker red than this is a lighter red. It's not as uniform as your eye might perceive it as first.
I think one of the things that's striking me too is the softness of the dog and his ear and all that kind of thing, in contrast to this, I guess we could call it like a harsh color of really vibrant colors behind him, very, very deep colors. And it really brings out how soft, especially that ear is, that it's just a totally different, I don't know, material, the human or the animal material as contrasted to the very, very severe coloring. And yeah.
There is a good contrast between the softness of the dog, not only his texture, but the color as well, compared to the more abstract parts of this artwork.
Yeah.
I gotta stop because I gotta ask. Gary says reminds me of the Prince Kiss video. So Gary, tell us more about that.
It's the same color palette, and then during that he goes behind the screen, and he has the same type of profile, same type of nobleness. You know, he always stays completely erect and kind of spins around, like, so it's like he's never looking down or above. He's always the way that Chrissy talked about the profile shot. And then there's also a veil that's used in that video to hide part of the face as well, which this is kind of
now sounding slightly familiar.
Yeah. so that was kind of it was the color palette and going behind the screen and hiding part of the face, and then the ear almost has that velvetness of the veil that's used in the video, so it has a lot of those elements to it.
I remember a friend of mine had a Weimaraner, and they are very, shall we say, stoic looking. You don't see that much emotion in their faces. And that's what I'm seeing here. Because Chrissy, I have a dog that you see everything in his face.
That's what I was going to say, actually, Ellen. And I, as we were talking, I wanted to come up with a word to describe this dog's emotion that it's giving us right now, and I couldn't. And I started to think about, you know, dogs have evolved with humans, and that dogs have all of the same muscles in the face that humans have, because they communicate with us through their facial expressions, and they read our facial expressions to know how to react. And what this piece of red plexiglass or whatever that material is does is it hides all of those muscles around the dog's eyes and mouth, so that we can't really read its expression. So it's obscuring, you know, from us, it's keeping us from understanding what is the dog's role here, you know?
Well, his eyes are, you know, very widely open, and they are visible. And he's looking straight ahead. It's not, I don't see any fear in the face at all.
No, it's
No.
just kind of stoic. It
Stoic,
looks
yeah.
stoic. If you can't read sort of the small muscle movements around the eyes, then it kind of just looks stoic to me.
Stoic, yeah, yeah.
So, and if you look at even some of William Wegman's other work where he's got the dogs in outfits with wigs on and ball gowns or whatever, they seem to have that same stoic look on their face no matter what they're doing. So it could just be the breed. I did read that Weimaraners were originally hunting dogs, and they're generations of breeding to have them sit still and point at prey. So they're one of the pointer dogs. So that works well when it comes to photographing them. They're already trained, so to speak, or they've got the genetic makeup to sit still. So Christy, let's go ahead and move to the next slide. And I think we had a great discussion of William Wegman and this work that's a little bit of a departure from what we expect to see.
Yeah.
Just a quick blurb. I think we're off with William Wegman. He's been on Sesame Street. He's been on TV. There's children's books, adult books, calendars. He's a very popular artist. One thing I found interesting is he has a Bachelor of Fine Arts and a Master of Fine Arts, both in painting. Yeah, we know him as a photographer.
Not photography.
So he actually didn't start photography until he got his first dog, a Weimaraner puppy who was named Man Ray in honor of the artist. And what I read is he said, just like when you have a baby or a child, you take pictures of it. He just took pictures of the dog and kind of had an aha moment and said, wow, this would make a great subject. And it was born, and Man Ray died in, I think, 1982. And then his next Weimaraner was named Fay Ray in honor of the actress from the 30s. And then Fay Ray had children, and those dogs had children. And to this day, he has Weimaraners in his work. So any last comments?
I just wanted to point out, Micah, you had talked about the edges of this artwork, and if you notice the medium, it's a Polaroid, but it's a very large one, and that's why you are seeing the edges of it, because when you're using these large format Polaroid cameras, you have to prepare the paper, basically coat the paper with the Polaroid crystals and emulsion by hand. So it turns out it's actually a really lovely part of these Polaroids is that you can see sort of the edges where it has the emulsion and the crystal coating. But it's very large, 24 by 20 the image and 40 by 30 the sheet of paper. So when we show this, which this was just out, Hank, in the A Telling Instinct exhibition over the fall, yes. I think, we frame it in such a way that you can see those really interesting edges of the image.
And I wonder if he intended for the edges to replicate the old photographs where they did have to sit for a minute.
Prepare them by hand, yeah.
Yeah, because the edges are very reminiscent of those older photographs.
And think about what a Polaroid is. It's a unique artwork. You can never reprint it. It's exposed onto the paper develops, and that's it. There's only one of them. They're each one of a kind.
Very true. And he actually, when I was reading up on him, when he was originally approached by Polaroid to do these works, they had wanted him to do black and white, and he said no for two reasons. One, he didn't want to go large format because he wanted to keep his image size to no bigger than 11 by 14 because he wanted them to be able to go into books. And two, he worked in color. So he and Polaroid came to an agreement on how he could work.
I'm curious, technically, if it's a giant Polaroid, how did he get the coloring? Because when you take a Polaroid, I'm confused.
Just like the Polaroids that you used to have, it's just a lot bigger camera and a lot bigger piece of paper.
But how did he get the red and the blues?
It's a color process.
Okay, got it. I still have my Polaroid camera.
They
Wonder if I
make both
can.
color paper and black and white.
Okay, cool. Thank you.
Mhm.
And I think I remember seeing a picture of him with the device, and it was like
They're
really
huge.
quite,
Yeah.
like they're massive. Like you set it up and it wasn't portable like a Polaroid.
No, Kodak doesn't make a whole lot of those cameras, and they, I think, tend to work with artists to use them.
Are they still being made?
I think that they're made so infrequently that it's sort of a big deal when they make one. But yes, this is from 2006.
Well,
If
I
this
think
is
I can
smaller,
speak for Jim when I say thank you all so much for your participation today. We went over a little bit, but I think it was well worth it. We had a great discussion on the artworks today and looking at our animals. So thanks again, everybody.
Yeah.
Well, thank you. This was
Thanks,
very, very good.
really excellent.
As
All right.
always, learned a lot, as we always do. So thank you guys for coming and bringing your really great ideas. Next week, our topic is clear as mud. And our docent, Sarah
In my life.
Ranke has chosen, I think it's 3 artworks from the museum's collection, and our special exhibition, Fantastical Forms and Meeting the Moon, to explore different ways that artists work in ceramic and have a decoration on those ceramics in order to convey an idea. They are narrative in all 3 of the cases that she chose. So it should be a really interesting look. I think that ceramics are one of those things that we use so often in our daily life that we kind of take them for granted. So this is a look at the ways that artists are working in ceramics. Great to see you guys. When you go and check your email, there should be our April listing of slow arts for you. 4 of them are Slow Art Fridays, and 1 of them is Slow Art Day. As Hank mentioned, there's the annual Slow Art Day that is celebrated at museums and galleries around the world, and that will be on Saturday, April the 10th at 1 p.m. But all of that information will be waiting for you in your inbox. If you'd like to get registered for the month of April, we invite you to click through the links on that email and to sign yourself up. Thanks, everybody. Have a great weekend.
Thank you,
thank
Christy.
you.
Bye, Christy.
Take
Bye
care.
now.